Welcome, everyone. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes. We're looking for our speaker. Daniel, are you on? All right, if you could just bear with us all for just a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. Again, I apologize, everyone. We are waiting on our speaker. We're reaching out to him right now. We will go to plan B if we're not able to reach him in a couple of minutes. So thank you for your patience. We'll be on in just a few minutes. So while we're waiting, Michelle Murphy's going to put up a poll, just kind of related but unrelated to the specific topic of today. But it's some information that we'd like to have you share with us about your specific awareness of some materials. And so, Michelle, are you able to launch that poll?
Yep, I'll put it up right now. It's just 2 quick questions. We're just looking to gain information on usability and accessibility of the Prehospital Pediatric Ready Toolkit. We're looking to see how many of you are aware of it and if you've used it.
Use the Prehospital Pediatric Ready.
I'm also going to put in the chat box contact information for Rachel Alter. If you have any feedback on the toolkit, we would love to hear it. I'll put it now.
So looks like for those who have responded so far, if you haven't responded, please do. It looks like we're like almost 50-50 for having used the toolkit. So Michelle, I think you have about, not counting you and me, which we wouldn't count, almost every one of the 38 who are participants. So if you want anyone else like to vote, we'll give you another 30 seconds or so to vote, and then we're going to move on and start having some discussion on today's topic. All right. Thanks, Michelle. So it looks like many of you have not used it. We certainly encourage you to take a look at it if you haven't already done so. And Rachel's contact information is in the chat box from Michelle. So reach out if you have any specific questions or suggestions for that. And she can certainly help you. So let's move on, Michelle, and I'm just going to, yep. So we can go ahead and end that poll. All right, sadly, our speaker has not joined. So, hey, we're all in the pre-hospital world, so we know that you've got to sometimes shift gears and go to plan B. So let's go to plan B. So let's talk about our topic earlier that we just had a presentation from Dr. Remick and Rachel Alter on communication and collaboration. We'd like to talk a little bit more about that. And most specifically, we'd like for you to share some examples of how you, or times when you put together an elevator pitch, how you did it, what process did you use, who'd you get involved? And we can certainly all learn from your experiences. So if anyone would like to share, just unmute yourself and share your experience with an elevator pitch. And don't be shy. This is a pre-hospital breakout, so not a shy group. So anybody have any experience you'd like to share? Or do you have an elevator pitch for anything?
This is Jason Mahoney from up in Montana.
Hi, Jason.
Montana was part of the PEC Learning Collaborative a few years back, and coming up with an elevator speech or pitch was part of the process we went through there. The intent of it at that time was to develop that short introduction and informational sort of, I mean, almost a speech, I guess, that we would use to try to talk people into designating a PEC in their agency. So it was an interesting process. I'd never done one to that scale and then worked that hard on it. I typically just kind of thrown things together. But especially since we were sharing it with the National Collaborative, I put a lot more work into it. It was an interesting process of trying to pick out the most impactful information and some data and things like that without it, going on for 10 or 15 minutes. So I don't have mine right in front of me. It's been a while to dig it up, but it really helped me try to distill down a ton of information into what I thought was really important about it. And to a good degree, it helped me focus my work in that collaborative based on what I really pulled out as the meaningful parts of the process to myself.
So thank you, Jason. Was there a specific process you used to create your elevator pitch? And then did you involve other people in creating that?
Excuse me. There was no formatted process that I was aware of at the time. So I kind of went through my own little internal process to do things like that. And I just sat down and brainstormed all of the reasons I thought that an EMS agency would or should have a PEC. I gathered data that I thought would be impactful and put it all together, and then just had to kind of distill it down and synthesize something that was of appropriate length. I did go through multiple drafts and shared that with some of my other collaborative partners throughout the process. It probably took about a week to get it to where we were happy with it.
Right. So I appreciate one of the things you just said is, you came up with, kind of what were all the things that, were of value. And so you were really kind of creating, the relevance kind of issues, that aspect that Rachel talked about. So I appreciate that. Anyone else like to share their experience with elevator pitch or things you want to discuss about elevator pitches that we can talk about as a group?
think our speaker's online already.
Daniel, did you join? Don't see him.
My mistake.
That's okay. Okay, so let's talk about, you know, kind of some of the components, you know, that Rachel was talking about. She talked about, you know, kind of, this is more my words of it, of, you know, kind of defining, you know, what is the situation or the problem. And it sounds like in this case, you know, the need for increased awareness of the PEC role and its, as Dr. Remick talked about, its value. So what are some thoughts that come to your mind in terms of, like, you know, words or phrases that should be part of that? You know, you don't have to come up with the exact words, you know, but what are just some words or phrases that you think might need to be in that first part of what's the situation? What's the problem we're trying to develop this elevator pitch for in terms of PECs? Shout out some words.
Can I speak? Maybe are you aware of what I find? My name is Lieutenant Soriano. I'm from Chesapeake Fire Department. I've just recently been volunteered to be the PEC. Actually, they offered it to me, and I have some pretty good passion about pediatric patients. And I said I'll be more than happy to do it. So very new into this, still getting my network together. But some of the examples that I thought that, you know, we before we had a PEC was actually when we had issues with med dosing for kids. So it was actually evident after reviewing reports that we weren't aware of how bad we were at that. So, and that led us to getting a product to actually diminish that. And now that we have that system, we've had less pediatric med errors. So we still have some, but a lot less. So
sure. So that's very interesting. So the dosing issues in pediatric patients, and you identified through chart review, and it sounds like you came up with a solution. Did that also help with in your organization? Did it help, I think, create the PEC role, or was the PEC role kind of first and then you identified it?
No, it actually helped create the PEC role. The PEC, so it's only been in about a year and a half since it was created for us. So I'm the first that I know of in our area. So, but we've been having numerous issues with pediatrics. So, you know, as you know, pediatrics is, when it comes to training, I'm sorry if you hear the background noise.
It's all right.
In training, focus is mainly on adults, and the pediatric is an aside. You know, it's never ever a focus. In my agency, we only have 5% of call volumes that are pediatrics, and ironically, it's one of those calls to where they're really, really okay, or they really, really are bad. There's really hardly anything in the middle, and so the frequency is not there. Therefore, you know, the practice, the memory of how to do it is not there. So we do have stopgaps to actually keep us from faltering, like med dose errors. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but we use Hentevi, and it's now accepted by our whole entire region. So we started it in Chesapeake, and then everybody now uses it here. So, but it wasn't an elevator pitch. It was more like, why are we having this? So as a PEC, now what we do is we actually review. I personally get all the pediatric calls, 17 years old and under, sent to me digitally, and I review all of it and do PI review of it just to make sure dosing is right, you know, things. So it's a little bit of hard work. I'm only one right now, so I am allowed to have more. Right now, I don't see money is kind of tight, as always. Y'all know that. So being efficient and using it wisely, you know, and we're celebrating moments of you know, good quality care that we see out in the field. So that way you kind of see the benefits of that. So that way, when I ask for something else in the future, they'll say, "Oh yes, okay, we will." So
great. What other? So there's an example of a specific situation. What else are some words or phrases, you know, that would help you in your elevator pitch for, you know, kind of describing, you know, what's the situation that requires us to have a PEC? Not requires, but that demonstrates, the need for one.
Louis, this is
Yes.
on with the Mount Bellevue Fire Department. What we've done in our role here is, one of the key words is recognition. And recognition goes both ways of something that we don't have, something that we need to improve on. And we're recognizing the need to, like I said, improve on, but also establish. We don't have the best in, our surveys that we've done in getting heavily involved in improvement of pediatrics. We found that we had many single points of failure where we had just one instructor to do this or one instructor to do that. Before too long, that instructor had moved on. Their certification had lapsed. We're just not where we need to be on that. So one of the words that we were using is just the recognition, and throw a few words in there with improvement and stabilizing or building upon current programs, and really getting it involved, not just from our medical director, the chiefs, the medics, but council and the public that we serve. Our city is very big on children, protecting children. We started the car seat safety program, and just moving forward with stuff like that, kind of building on that. So that's my 2 cents worth. I appreciate the time.
Great. Well, thank you, Brent. A couple of things, I'd like to kind of reiterate that you said that I really appreciated is you talked about both things, the things that you're doing now that you could use some improvement with, but also I heard you talk about the things that maybe are missing, but you'd like to establish. And those are really good points, because that really lends itself towards the value of what we talked about a few months ago, which was the environmental scan. And the environmental scan that you do in your specific organizations helps you to identify those things that Brent was just talking about, which are the things that are missing that need to be established, and then some things that you have in place that maybe you'd like to, either you recognize there's a need for improvement, or you recognize there's a need for at least review for potential improvement. So it's really good to think about that those are two different, related but different kind of aspects, and encourage you to use that environmental scan to your advantage. So thanks for bringing those up, Brent. Those are good. So what other words? We heard approve, establish new things. We heard about a specific need, which was med dosing error issue. What other kind of things in terms of either the problem, the situation, or maybe the relevance? What's the relevance of having a PEC? So what's the value? What words could we have in our elevator pitches?
Can I add one more thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so when we decided to do this, one of the guidance that I had from my chief medical officer, is that he wanted me to be the hands, eyes, and ears on the pediatric section. So as a PEC, you actually are part of numerous things, from acquisition of new items, protocols. So whenever time those goes through meetings, they always, now that there's actually a PEC, that's an individual that actually looks at the aspect of pediatrics. So, beforehand, you would only get that kind of input if that individual had, passion for it. Now that you have a PEC, for every meeting, such as, okay, we're going to go get a stretcher, are there stretchers that already have pediatric capabilities? Or when we get bags, are there bags that have pediatric sections for dividing it, so that way we don't mix them? So it's important when you pitch yourself as a PEC, you have to actually, despite the fact it's not, the call volume is not there, when the necessity, when you need somebody, that it is already implemented. So that was the other way, is that, the PEC is the hands, eyes, and ears on the pediatric side of EMS.
So you're certainly right on there with you stated exactly, one of the relevant issues for a PEC, which is providing that PEDS perspective and always thinking about it that way. And that's exactly what you just described. And I liked how you included specific examples of when it came to new things like protocols or equipment, having that PEC who serves to ensure that the pediatric voice is there in your organization. So I appreciate that. Anything else that you guys can think of in terms of things you might want to have, or that would be important to have, words or phrases that describe the situation in terms of we need a PEC, the relevance, why do we need a PEC? And then of course you could even say, well, the proposed solution is identify a PEC and get one on board. So what other things can you think of? Well, I'll throw in a couple things, just thinking of some of the things that if you think back on some of the data Dr. Remick presented, some of that data is certainly beneficial in terms of describing, the situation. And the situation is, the reality is that for most, I'm always cautious about generalizing, but for most EMS organizations within the United States, that the proportion of patient encounters that involve pediatric patients is pretty low. And that's what the data is really telling us, which means that, and as you just stated it, that the community cares about making sure that we take care of children and do a good job with that. So there's no question we want to do a good job with that, but in order to do a good job with that being a small proportion, it means we need sometimes a different approach, because it's not what we commonly do. So in terms of the situation is, relevant data, and certainly when you get the slides, you can copy some of the things that Dr. Remick presented, and that was just a small portion of it. But in terms of what the current situation is within the U.S. in the pre-hospital setting, in terms of the minimal encounters we have with pediatric patients in the EMS setting. So data would be important. Again, if you think of something else, just pop right in. One thing, I'm going to just pause here real quickly. I have a tendency to forget that we may have some new people that weren't in the last couple of sessions, but Michelle and I didn't introduce ourselves, but just a real brief kind of intro is, for those of you who don't know, because I've been in all of these pre-hospital sessions, my name is Luis Gonzalez. I'm with the EIC. I have a different role than you would expect. I'm the Director of Operations, which is different than what I've done for the last 35 years, where I was involved in quality improvement and in EMS for 30 years, both as a field provider and educator and as a quality improvement specialist. So certainly have the background in EMS, but not doing that anymore. And my co-host is Michelle Murphy. Michelle, do you want to just kind of say hi, introduce yourself there?
Yep. I am Michelle Murphy. I am the project manager for the pre-hospital and hospital domains of EIIC. But my background is as a paramedic in New York. So currently in Texas, but that's where I did most of my work. And
I feel to mention, I am in Texas at the University of Texas Dell Medical School currently. And my EMS experience has been in Texas and in King County, Washington. So kind of a couple different parts of the country. So back to our topic. Other thoughts about elevator pitch before we move on to talk about proposed solution? So if you think about your elevator pitch and you've put together what you feel is critical for what's the problem or situation here in terms of an absence of a PEC, an identified PEC. And then you've kind of put together what you think you want to share in terms of what's the relevance, what's the point of it, what's the value. You've put those together, and now you're thinking about, so in my elevator pitch, you're really pitching a proposal of, and so some people talk about it as what if, but you could certainly say, all right, so my proposal is, so I propose that we and it sounds like for many of you, at least from the examples that I'm hearing is that you were identified as a PEC, and you said yes, which is good. But is that the only, can you think of other ways to describe your solution other than we need to identify a PEC, or you need to have me as a PEC? What are other solutions? Can you think of any others? So just to give you a couple of hints, one way you might do that is really look at the examples that Rachel and I think it was Rachel mostly sharing, that you could certainly say, do your pitch, and maybe you're expressing your pitch to your chief or whoever in your chain of command that's appropriate, and you're expressing, your pitch. That maybe your solution might be starting small, and maybe you start with, my proposal is I'd like to, and we can take, for example, I'm sorry, I forgot your first name, Mr. Soriano. What was your first name?
Brian Soriano.
Brian, thank you. So if you think about Brian, he had it at some point in time, his organization had an idea about a specific issue they wanted to tackle. So if you think about it, your pitch, if you're really early on, there's no traction for a PEC yet, that maybe you're defining the problem, the situation, you're defining the relevance of a PEC, or the relevance of a need for some improvement there. And maybe your solution might be small. And it might be, hey, one of the things we're recognizing is, and we use, Brian's as an example, like we're recognizing, we're having some errors in dosing with pediatric patients. So I'd like to propose that what we do is, and you make your proposal, and you make that proposal, and that's a starting point that then could gain some traction towards, after you're successful with that, because we're going to be positive, we're going to be successful with your proposal, that the next thing might be then moving forward with then, we did this. Imagine what would happen if we had someone identified as a PEC in that role who could really coordinate these things and lead other improvement efforts beyond the one that we just completed successfully. So that may be, one other approach. For those of you who are currently PECs, how did your role get created? Meaning, how did that come to happen? Did someone pitch the idea, or was it just the chief's idea? Anyone want to share how that started in your organization?
Hi, my name is Cajal. I'm with the Heartland Fire Department out in Wisconsin. I apologize. I'm just getting over being ill with something, so if my voice is crackly, I apologize. So my role started off with the PEC role at our fire department. I had previously worked in a clinical position at a children's hospital in Texas, and moved back to Wisconsin for a full-time fire position at our agency, which shortly led to me becoming a DC or division chief of EMS. My role was more proposed to me from the fire chief. It was something that was brought up through the state that had sent out an email to the chief, who was our service director, and he relayed it over to me. He asked my interest, and he knew that I had a strong passion for EMS, or for pediatric and EMS, even prior to me working in the clinical side of it down in Texas. I worked for this department for 7 years prior to moving to Texas and working down there. And I was big into EMS preparedness for pediatrics before I had left the fire department. And then when I came back, he found that I was, still in a huge passion for it. I'm actually currently in nursing school to become, my goal, pediatric emergency nurse / transport nurse. And he said, you know what? I see you as a great candidate for this. I'm going to push this over to you. If you're interested, feel free to sign up, which I was immediately did with our Wisconsin state, which then led into the PWDC, the Pediatric Workforce Development. And my biggest goal with the fire department side is, preparing ourselves for pediatric patients, assessment wise, I put every training that we have, even though it seems more of an adult training, I try to put a pediatric twist to it or an aspect into it as well for our providers to understand the differences in assessing what we're looking for. Over the course of the last year, I've worked on implementing new protocols. I help include pediatric into medication dosaging, assessment, what things are we looking for that are different, especially from having it on the clinical side and watching it as a clinical aspect. And it's one of those that over the course of the few years, or these 2 years of me being in this role, I now oversee all the pediatric EMS runs that we have. I evaluate them, see what things that our department or our members on our department are missing during assessments, what are key things in case something changes. I've had it even where I still operate clinically as a 24/48 paramedic as well in the department on top of my role. And whenever I have a pediatric patient, it's amazing how some of my providers or my other EMS partners are watching and how I am assessing a peds patient versus an adult patient. The differences of what you're looking for and, assessing your patient more visually versus talking to them. Because I always tell my partners that pediatrics don't really express to you what their concerns are. You have to visually see it. And you have to look and be very keen on certain areas when you're assessing them. I always say adults can talk back. Kids are going to be afraid to talk to you. So you want to make sure that you're looking at that visual assessment and watching for the warning signs right away. And I think I've developed a lot of that with my paramedics on my department that make them more comfortable when it comes to pediatric care. And I try to get them more involved.
What's interesting, Kajal, is you brought up kind of another pathway, for PECs being created, and that was, it sounds like your chief came to you with that, and he or she had the idea from some message from the state, and that goes back to what was discussed earlier in the importance of coordination and collaboration across your community and region and state. So it kind of was maybe an end around way. So rather than coming up from internal, it was external through some other organization who somehow sent a message to chiefs, and your chief picked up on that and recognized your interest, and it went from there. So that's another pathway, which again kind of illustrates the importance of this coordination and collaborating across these state, region, and community kind of groups. So thanks for sharing that. Anyone else?
You're welcome.
Your get started.
Kahil, can I ask Kahil, is it Kahil or Kajil?
It's Kajal.
Okay, so how big is your department?
So our department, we're a single station 911 fire EMS service that operates about just over 1,000 calls per year. About 80% of our call volume is EMS, and we have a pediatric population of 7 different grade schools in our response area, ranging from 4K all the way up to high school.
All right, thank you for that. I was just kind of wondering, because some of the things I've been thinking of is because one of the things they're asking me is, do I need assistance in what I'm doing as a PEC?
Yes.
My department is about 450 strong. We do 35,000 calls a year, which is significantly. We have 15 fire stations. So, and I range between, reviewing probably every Monday, I get between 15 to 25 pediatric reports. So, I mean, it's pretty significant. And right now, I don't think it's too laborious because most of them are very, very simple calls. I do like the fact that you still run calls, because I think being the example on how to do things is actually is probably the best way to represent it, being a PEC. So not only are you are going to be the eyes and the ears, but you're going to be almost a subject matter expert of it. So, so when the call does happen, it should be you that performs the best. So.
Yep, definitely. And I try to help get my all my providers up to par as far as their scopes and their skills. And I'm one that says I'm let people operate to their level. I'm not one that likes to, I always say, hoard the scope of practice, hoard all the skills. I want people to keep practicing to better their scope and their skills. And I always say, you know what, there's never a wrong to every, well, there's always a wrong to something, but I always say this is a learning opportunity. When you do something wrong, this is a time to learn from it and see what you can do better later.
All right, other thoughts on elevator pitch for creating a PEC? Were there one thing? There were a couple other topics that were discussed. I just want to make sure that there aren't any questions that maybe we could discuss. Like, are there any questions or concerns about how to utilize the stakeholder grid that Dr. Remick, I believe, reviewed? Anybody ever used one of those before, or something like it? Well, it's very helpful, especially if you're trying to put groups together, like as we're trying to form, maybe advisory groups or things like that. When you have a need for a diverse perspective and diverse representation, the stakeholder grid kind of helps you with determining, kind of what role the different members of that group you're trying to put together would actually play. So knowing the role helps you with making sure you have the right people in the room to be most successful with whatever it is you're trying to accomplish in terms of that group. All right, we're gonna just real quickly, I'd like to just ask if there aren't any other discussions on the elevator pitch. Questions about or anything you guys would like to talk about the upcoming phase 2, which is where you would, if you wish to participate in phase 2, and Meredith talked about registering for that by, I forgot the date. It's the 3rd week of this month, but I can't recall the specific date. But do you have any questions about that aspect in order to help you make your decision about whether you wish to participate in phase 2?
Actually, I have a question about that. So they said on phase 2 that they might ask you to provide data or things like that when you're operating the phase 2 section. So far, I've been through all this phase 1. We had some, of course, connection issue the first couple sessions.
Right.
Difficult. So it's been smoother the last 4 or 5. But what is the benefit of doing the phase 2? In terms of, if you're just starting out as a PEC, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I already have enough on my plate. So I know I want to add value to my position by knowing everything, that you all will provide as far as phase 2. But as far as phase 2, what should I expect in terms of what do I need to present? Because right now the data that I have, I'm worried about HIPAA, of course, we don't have any names or anything like that. Numbers, those are easy to get, with our electronic, now that everything is electronic, so which is wonderful.
Right.
I can't imagine doing it in the paper days. So
I think that is a little bit less important, although so let me kind of back up and just kind of real briefly go over, kind of the phase 2. The idea is to take what we've talked about, what we've learned in terms of the different QI kind of approaches to doing some of these things, and now applying them to an actual project, and you get to pick the project. It's whatever fits for your organization. So if you use as an example, if I pick myself, then I say, in my organization, I'm going to use my environmental scan to identify maybe an area. I'm a new PEC, and this is all kind of new to me. So I'll start with something simple. So I look at my environmental scan and I say, oh, there's an area we could maybe see if we can find a way to do that better. So I'll pick that. It's pretty simple, and I'm kind of new to this, so I'll start with that. The phase 2 would be then taking your idea, your improvement idea, the topic, the project that you want to do, And then coming up with, all right, so what's my aim statement? And included in that aim statement is, how do I know that when we implement the strategies that I'm going to propose that we implement, when we implement those, how do I know that there was a change? And how do I know that that change was actually an improvement and not a change in the opposite direction? And that's measurement. And so the aim statement, we would walk through that with you, and we would help you. So you would maybe put a draft together, you'd bring it to the meeting, and we'd talk through, and you'd hear experiences. It's really the collaborative's idea is to share. And so in phase 2, it's truly going to be a sharing thing. There's not a lot of lectures. It is really more of maybe you saying, here's my aim statement. It's a little rough, but I'd like your feedback. And the group that's in your group would say, hey, that's really good, but have you thought about maybe rewording this? And so they help you to learn to frame your aim statement better. And then we move on to, okay, so what are some implementation strategies that I could use? So some strategies to improve, what would they be? And then you could use tools like a fishbone diagram or others to try to say, what are some possibilities for that? And you could, all of those tools, that we've talked about, you would put those together. You put that together in your plan. So here's my idea of an implementation. I'm sorry, my change strategies, and this is what I would want to implement. Again, in another session, then you would put that together. In each of those sessions where I'd say you'd come back to, we'd provide you with a template slide, and you would fill in what you've come up with. This is my aim statement. These are my strategies. This is my plan. This is my measurement. This is how I want to do that. And you would present all that. And the idea is then, because it's pretty quick, this is all over just a short period of time, right? So the idea is then after that, or even during, you could then take that, pitch it to your organization. This is what I want to do, and hopefully get the okay. Then you would actually start collecting your data. How did we do? Kind of measure that we actually made a change. And you would be taking it from there. So we're really just kind of helping you build out that plan using quality improvement kind of approaches. And then you would actually implement it in your organization. So you want to choose something you think you could maybe implement, but you're gonna pitch it, you're gonna implement it, you're gonna collect the data. So we're not necessarily looking for your data in the group. You wouldn't have to share that with us. Did that make sense? Did I leave anything out, Michelle?
Yeah, you did. It did make sense, because I was like thinking, so sometimes the department moves at a very slow pace.
Oh yeah.
Depends on, I can think of numerous pediatric things that we've done, from, getting ACRs for our stretchers, that became like, well, we can only afford 3, where do we put it? Now we have it on all our stretchers, and we use, and we have spares now. So if anything needs to be, so that's very, very low hanging fruit. So I understand trying to use and do things that are attainable, because when something is attainable, it actually gives you a great reward immediately, and it gives momentum for whatever you're doing. So but right. I have pretty high lofty goals, on pediatric calls, and I tell people, as a pediatrics is, and I hunt. So I use this analogy all the time, and I said, and when I teach, I say, think of, like a adult cardiac arrest as hunting a doe at 100 yards. You're using the same tools, you're using the same gun, you got the same camo. Now think of pediatric cardiac arrest as like a 200-yard, trophy buck shot. It's a little bit more pressure, but you're still using the same tools. So I've noticed, I've been a paramedic since '96, and I've seen our department, tremendously increase in capabilities, but I haven't seen its capabilities increase in pediatric side. And I think a lot of it is because of fear. So I was hoping that phase 2 would actually, be more helpful in that. And I see how it is. The only thing I'm worried about is that, when I'm implementing this, it might not be the same time frame as what we are all doing during the phase 2 meeting. So I'm,
right.
You see what I'm saying? It takes, a good amount of traction for it to actually implement, so I can collect data.
Right. And that's a good point. And I want to make sure we're all on the same page, that the expectation is not that you, well, that would be nice. It's not our expectation that you would implement your improvement project during the phase 2, because you're right, that's asking a lot, especially in an organization that's either large or, as you put it, sometimes a little slow moving, that it's not realistic. And so what we want to do is help you to build the improvement project and plan, and what are the strategies, and then you implement it at your pace, most likely after or the later stages of phase 2. Hopefully, it's just to give you a look into the future, that hopefully we will have another version of this, whether that's in 2 years, I don't know, but somewhere in the future. And our hope would be that we reach out to some of you, and we'd love to have you like as a guest speaker saying, this is when I was going through phase 2, this was the project that I did, and it took me a year to get it done, but this is the results of what we did back then. And so you can share your experiences, and the value of you coming back and sharing your experiences is other future PECs, not necessarily those in this room, but future ones will learn from what you guys are doing right now in phase 2. Any other questions about phase 2? That was a really good one. I appreciate you bringing that up. Any other questions about phase 2? Meredith will be giving you more information as we progress. But if you have any questions, please reach out and offline, and we're happy to talk with you about phase 2 and help you see what's involved. And we certainly want to alleviate any fear of doing it. It is work, so we're not gonna say it isn't.
I had a little fear when Meredith said, yeah, we bring your data and everything. I'm like, oh my goodness.
No,
how am I going to collect that data when it takes me almost 8-9 months to train
right.
400 some people?
It would be more bring your slide of this is how I plan to do it, not this is what I already did.
Right.
All right, I think we're coming up to the end of our time. All of you have been great. I appreciate your input. And we apologize again for absence of our speaker. Hopefully you still got something out of the discussion we did have. But thank you all for sharing, and we will see you again, oh my gosh, already next month in March. And we will be on our final, that's our final session, which will be on quality improvement. And I am actually leading that discussion with Meredith. And we're going to be trying to put it all together to give you the final summation of the tools in preparation for phase 2. So we'll see you next month. Also, the coaching session is also, Michelle, do you have that date in front of you?
I think it looks like it's the 17th, February 17th.
Yeah. So February 17th, so that's 2 weeks, is the coaching session. We would love for you to come with your questions about phase 2 or your questions about anything that we've talked about, but especially phase 2. So join us then. That's just an open discussion to help you guys learn. So it's all yours. So join us on the 17th, especially if you have questions about the phase 2. Otherwise, we'll talk with you again in March. So thank you all.